At the turn of the century, in the year of our Lord, 1900, Samuel W. McCallie, state geologist, declares that the definitive geological report that he prepared, entitled Iron Ores of Georgia, that the Georgia iron business began in Cass County, today Bartow County, with the first stone furnaces that were built on Stamp Creek in northeast Bartow County. I'm Joe Head, native of Bartow County. I'm retired from Kennesaw State University, where I was Dean of Enrollment Services and spent 40 years in higher education. My hobby is local history. I'm also the current Vice President of the Etowah Valley Historical Society here in Bartow County. EVHS is the official historical society here in Bartow County. The mission of EVHS is the preservation and the education of Bartow County history. EVHS is an advocate for this trail system proposed as Parks Allatoona. We're an advocate, and we see opportunities to reintroduce our history's origin and founding and the embedded history along the way of the Parks Allatoona footprint for future generations to learn and benefit and enjoy. Our forgotten legacy rests in the Parks Allatoona trail system. The origin of Bartow County was the discovery of first gold in the Stamp Creek area down to the Allatoona Creek area. People were first joined and drawn to Bartow County, Cass County in those days, because of the discovery of gold, and then the unexpected discovery of abundant ores, particularly iron ore, manganese, barite, ochre, and the Cherokee Land Lottery, which most people came to enjoy. People were drawn to Cass County because of the gold, and then iron ore was discovered, manganese, barite, ochre, and the Cherokee Land Lottery. These treasures have become smothered in vegetation and lack of access in this area, and unfortunately, the diminishing knowledge of the treasures that rest in this region. The proposed footprint of Parks Allatoona has somehow, over the decades, become less accessible and, as a result, cloaked our early pioneer mining history that settled this county. The proposed Parks Allatoona trail footprint holds the best of Bartow's founding treasures, and we would like to reintroduce those to the public. I'd like to share some of the hidden treasures and pearls that rest within the footprint of the proposed Parks Allatoona. First of all, this is an article that was printed in the local historical society's newsletter that locates where many of these stone furnaces were built along the Stamp Creek and Allatoona Creek area. Each of these circles represent a stone furnace. At one time, there were as many as 12 of these stone furnaces in this area. And at the time, Lake Allatoona was not there, but these particular furnaces were built on the creeks, and they mined and smelted ores from the mining area. This is an example of the Cherokee Land Lottery. To the left, you will see a gridded outline of the Bartow County footprint, and you'll notice that the southern portion or the lower area are smaller grids. This was because this is the area that gold was discovered in, and more opportunity was given for people who wanted to mine gold, perhaps, and they got an opportunity to have a section of the county where the northern area was more agriculture. Here's an example of some ores that we have in the local Tellus Museum here in Bartow County, and these are specifically gold examples that exist for people to come and see. This is a current, this is a furnace that no longer exists in the Stamp Creek area, and it also shows a covered bridge that went over the creek at the time in the top lower on the top left. And such examples of these still remain on the Stamp Creek area, although a number have been dismantled and no longer exist. This is an example of one that does appear right at the base of Allatoona Dam. It is known as the Cooper's Iron Works. And if you'll see in the black and white photo, if you'll look in the opening, you can see an image of a car that was parked in there for some time. And today people can go and picnic around the area and hike. So this is in the area of the proposed Parks Allatoona footprint. This is an example of another existing furnace. There's two here, one to the left and one to the right. Both still remain in the north portion of the county on Stamp Creek and makes for great entertainment and outings for people to enjoy. As an example, the Historical Society has sponsored hikes in these areas, and this is an example of our most recent one. And this is right at the tip of the northern part of Stamp Creek, and people enjoy this as I said, for hikes and picnics. Along the area of Stamp Creek, there are other pieces of history and artifacts, and this is the ruins of Jones Buggy Factory that's right on the creek, Stamp Creek. If you look through the top right photograph, you can see the creek there, and this was a power-driven water wheel that provided the energy and the power they needed to mill the wood for the buggies. And this is an example of a gold mine that once existed on the Allatoona Creek area, gold mining in the 1930s. And here is an example of ruins of Etowah Village, also along the footprint of the Parks Allatoona. When the Civil War occurred in Bartow County, this was a village that was a very prosperous village with about 1,000 population, and as Sherman's troops came into the county, it was targeted and it was destroyed. It was burned at the time that he passed through. This is what the village somewhat looked like in a rendering, and it has a dam that you can see to the center right that powered the mills there, and there was a grist mill and a mill to produce nails and corn and other products. So it was destroyed as Sherman came through. And this is at the southern tip of the proposed Parks Allatoona. And this is perhaps the greatest, and it was not perhaps, but the greatest and bloodiest battle fought in the Civil War in Bartow County. It was called Allatoona Pass Battlefield. And there were a total of 1,500 casualties on both sides, Confederate and Union forces. To the right, you'll see Memorial Field. Fought there are represented in this memorial. Along the trails of the proposed Parks Allatoona, there's some hidden pieces of history, such as this one, known as the Abernathy family, that became Abernathy'sville. This was a place where the Abernathy's family came from, North Carolina, and they brought 13 brothers who all settled at once with their families, and it was called Abernathy'sville. And they had to be relocated once the dam was constructed because the waters were expected to cover the settlement, the little hamlet. And what was left there was a cemetery, which became known as Old Macedonia. So this is a favorite place for people to hike to, and it's remote to get to it because it was so cut off by the waters, but it ultimately did not cover the cemetery. This is the remains or an artifact of a bridge that represents the access to Cass County, Canton to Cassville. This was the only way into the area when people came into Bartow County to mine, to find gold, to settle, to have a chance at the land lottery. And it was destroyed by a fierce flood and was not rebuilt. But these impoundments, these bridge piers, are still there today and are close to the stone furnaces. This is an example or a collection of railroad history that also rests within the footprint of Bartow County for Parks Allatoona. These piers are known as the Etowah River Bridge Piers. And you can see top left, wood-burning locomotive about to traverse the bridge and southbound, and then you see about a 1930s engine going over a little more improved section of that bridge. And then today it's just the bridge pier ruins. It was burned several times during the Civil War by both sides. A favorite place for people to visit and enjoy the sights. And in conclusion, at the top of the hill overlooking the Allatoona Dam, which we call the Overlook, there's a marvelous museum there that covers the Native American history, the construction of the dam, and the Civil War. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to our next speaker, Molly Smith.
Hello, welcome to Parks Allatoona, connecting town and wilderness, past and present. I'm Molly Smith Cole from the Cartersville-Bartow County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we are streaming live from the Clarence Brown Conference Center. Our mission with Parks Allatoona is to provide access to embedded hidden treasures, create 50+ miles of interconnected trails along the northern border area of Lake Allatoona, and to connect town and wilderness through a 12-acre corridor within 8,500 acres of existing public land. Where is Bartow County, you may ask? Well, Bartow County is just north of Atlanta. The eastern 1/3 of our county is located in the most southern range of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The western part of our county is located in the Great Valley. We have little less than 110,000 in population. We're 40 miles north of Atlanta, and we have access to 6 million people within an hour drive. At this time, I want to introduce our rockstar panel. We have Mr. Mike Bearden. He's the Park Allatoona visionary. Dr. Ed Bostick. He's the Bartow County Green Space Committee, Georgia Botanical Society. Joe Head, Vice President, Etowah Valley Historic Society. Me, Molly Cole, Marketing Coordinator for Cartersville-Bartow County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and Mr. Brenton Baggett. He's the Assistant Director for Bartow County Parks and Recreation. At this time, I'd like to bring Mike up to talk about the proposed park footprint.
Good morning. Thank you, Molly. My background is from a retired business career involving engineering, finance, and planning activities. I'm also fortunate to be a stroke survivor. This is really my first attempt to do any public speaking, and since that injury 2 years ago, so I hope that my verbal stumbles that will happen will not distract you too much from my messages. Bear with me. But the most important aspect of my life and my wife is represented by the legacy of our 3 children and 9 grandchildren, and particularly including our family adventures in the wild over the decades with nature settings. The life-changing value of those outdoors and nature experiences are important to us, me, and all of us. We're all lifted from such immersions in the wild, which help us realize that we are all but just a small piece of a much larger whole. As a function of that, most of my last 15 years, avocation interests, activities have been based on, my experiences and abilities, but those life experiences in the wild. And I try to focus the benefit from those experiences to my wider community beyond my family. Accordingly, today's focus is on the beautiful concept of Parks Allatoona. Then from that, I want to introduce you a little bit with the concept before we drill down on major aspects of that from my associates. And this map shows you in the middle, if you can see the blue outline, that's what we call the middle portion of Lake Allatoona, which allows us to talk about this. The left-hand side of that you can't really make out, but this part of the lake is embedded in a mountainous region that's defined by a geographical feature called the Allatoona mountain range of the southern end of the Blue Ridge Mountains within the Appalachian Mountains. And the defining geographic feature is the Cartersville Fault, that if you do a bird's eye view of this map, you'll see everything to the left is the valley and ridge area that's flatlands, like most of the state. but we're focusing today on the right-hand side along the wild north shore of Lake Allatoona, where there's, if you can make out the green outline, that describes roughly 8,600 acres that will define Parks Allatoona imprint. And the most important element that I'd like for y'all to hear is this beautiful area that's thus far largely inaccessible is within 1 hour drive of 6 million people. So we have an opportunity that's amazing with this footprint. This map shows a little bit more features on that imprint, and it shows, if you can make out the outline, an existing network of developed roads whereby there's not any major capital investment to gain access to this area. Further, surrounding this green imprint, Bartow County has been very aggressive in assembling green space territories that buffer this area and supplement it in a wonderful way that we'll talk about later. And further, as a result of that and the long-range land use plan in the area and the existing zoning, there's only 3 existing houses within 1/2 mile of the proposed trail network. In other words, it's a very remote and wilderness setting. In fact, within 1 mile, I doubt that there's more than 20 houses within 1 mile of this beautiful wilderness area. The access that we're going to be talking about as we go forward this morning is a trail segment that really will involve only 12 acres of footprint of using this existing wilderness area. With that brief introduction, we'll do details later. I would like to turn this over to my associate, Ed Bostic. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ed Bostic. I'm a resident of Cartersville. I'm a retired professor of biology from Kennesaw State University. Specialties there, and throughout my life have been botany, biology, ecology, plant systematics, geology, and especially the natural history of Georgia. So I'll be speaking about the natural history of this area for a few moments. I suppose it's called natural history. My person that's following me, Mr. Joe Head, will be speaking of human history. So we're going to tie in together pretty well on that. My background really is in outdoor education and encouraging people to get out off their sofas, turn off their television and their phones, and to get into the woods and get dirty and have a good time. The function of this, as far as I'm concerned, is recreation, but also a word that I've sort of coined, recreation. Recreation for our bodies, but recreation of our we can sort of classify it as to upland sites, which tend to be drier, and lowland sites, which tend to be more moist and sheltered. It's a diverse area. The upland sites range from almost rocky outcrops with little vegetation dominated by pine forest, especially on Pine Mountain. And then throughout the rest of the thing, a sort of a, what we would call in botany, a mesic forest, kind of halfway moist and halfway dry, dominated by hardwood trees, sometimes pines. In lowland sites, things get a little bit more damp and a little bit more cool. And so we get much more wildflowers, rocky outcrops, and almost swamp-like or marsh-like vegetation in some places. That was vegetation. Vegetation is what you see when you look out over the vista, sort of description of the cover. The flora is what we see when we look at individual kinds of plants in the area. And one species there that's particularly interesting to me, that's not unique to the area, but very unusual, is the picture of the plant with sort of reddish fruit on it, the third from the left. That's the big leaf magnolia. Like most magnolias, it's a deciduous plant, loses its leaves during the wintertime, but the thing that makes it so interesting is its name. It's the big leaf. It's the biggest leaf in the northern hemisphere. Those leaves sometimes get to be almost a meter long, and it blooms around May around here. Other trees that are common in the center bottom is the white oak. That's probably the dominant tree among many other oaks that we have in here, maybe a dozen oaks in this particular area. Up in the upper left is the well-known tulip poplar, which is a beautiful tree in the magnolia group. And you can see why it's named tulip tree. The flowers look like orange and green tulips. In dry sites, there are dominance by pines. In the center upper is the most common pine in the area, which is the loblolly pine. In the lower left is the Virginia pine, which dominates on dry sites like Pine Mountain. And then the small picture on the lower bottom is the longleaf pine, which reaches its most inland and almost most northern distribution in this area. Underneath those are what we call subcanopy trees and the usual dogwoods, which are not uncommon around here. And then in the lower left, sassafras, which is a folk interest. And on the lower right, sourwood, which is a common understory tree. The center is not a tree, but I have it on here because it's very interesting. That's a plant called galax. Galax is a shrub with evergreen leaves. I'm sorry, it's an herb with evergreen leaves that's much more common further north and up in the mountains. The reason it persists here is because it only grows in the cool, sheltered stream valleys. It's a relic of the former Ice Age. When the Ice Age was in existence over 12,000 years ago, the climate around here was much cooler, and plants like galax and mountain laurel in the upper left were much more common. And as the climate has been warming for the last 12,000 years, plants like galax and mountain laurel have sort of been restricted down to the remaining cool spots. The understory also consists of things like wild azaleas and hawthorns and blueberries. The area is as diverse a community as you can find in North Georgia. The area is, again, forest dominated. The type of forest depends on the site, the history, and the time span. This area of the state, and indeed most of the Southeast, is not covered with virgin timber. It's all been cut down mostly during the 19th century because of agriculture, mining, and industry for the areas along Stamp Creek and in the North Shore. Presumably, after the area was cut down, timbered, it went through a process known as succession. After the area was cleared, herb vegetation, grasses and such things, goldenrods and ragweeds grew up. Then as time went by, those were replaced by pines, and eventually they were replaced by hardwood trees. Oaks and hickories are the dominant trees. Again, depending on the site. On Pine Mountain, that process is probably stopped at the pine stage. The process takes from anywhere from maybe 80 years to 200 years. So some of our forests are at least that old. Along stream banks, we get the rocky streams. I've often heard some of these streams described as mountain streams, similar to the ones you'd see in North Georgia or in the Smokies. On the top of Pine Mountain and other ridges, we get rock outcrops where the vegetation is very low, almost what we would call a bald in the Smokies. Very thin soil, and pines are the dominant plants. Stamp Creek is another one of these mountain streams. I used to take my students here for geological sampling and for searching for wildflowers. Along stream mouths like Boston Creek and Stamp Creek, as the streams empty into the lake, you get a little bit of development of marsh vegetation. There's not much along the banks of Lake Allatoona because of the periodic drawdown of the water never gives it enough time to develop a lakeside vegetation. I'm closed by pointing out that the value of this was well represented by the most famous quote by Henry Thoreau of Walden Pond fame. Thoreau is often quoted as saying, "In wilderness is the preservation of the world." And now we have a chance for the preservation, for the recreation and the recreation of citizens of this area. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Molly Cole. Thanks for having me back. I'm going to talk today about tourism and economic impact. I'm a Bartow County resident and native myself, so when I was introduced to this whole concept, it really hit home to me. I spent the better part of my childhood growing up on McCaskey Creek, playing in the water, hiking to the Dam Museum and down to Cooper's Furnace with my grandmother. So this is a part of my childhood that I'm excited to share with everybody. So bringing on to tourism and economic impact, you have a unique opportunity here because you can discover hidden historical gems and lost civilization, but also because tourism follows people's interests, and that's the biggest unique opportunity. As you can see from Statista 2020, hiking enthusiasts increased 60% from 2016 to 2018. I want to point out that these are pre-pandemic numbers. Reason being because everything in tourism has changed. Our whole entire, everything we've built has been completely turned upside down. But one thing that hasn't changed is hiking. If you see the news these days, COVID-19 pandemic grows popularity of hiking nationwide. It reveals there's need for increased trails, park resources, outdoor creation councils. Outdoor recreation provides big boost to Washington economy, and it's the revitalization of America through recreation. Also, is hiking the only summer activity that's basically still the same? And it is. I mean, everything has changed and the way we do things have completely changed, but hiking is still true to itself. It's still feet on the ground. It's still people outdoors. So I want to bring it a little bit closer to home. Although the Bartow County CVB tourism website, visit cartersvillega.org, we suffered a 40% decline in traffic from March 15, 2020 to August 31st, 2020 versus the same pre-pandemic period in 2019. But our page that has hiking, it increased 19% during the same period. So it's a really huge jump for us. And also to bring it home, when recreation outdoor things that are built within tourism usually have to wait for the tourism infrastructure to be created around it, but you don't have that problem here. The tourism infrastructure is already in Bartow County existing. As Mike has told you, one of the opening points would be from Pine Mountain, which is also off the same exit, Main Street exit of 288 on I-75. From there, you are less than 2 miles from Stroll Shop and Dining in downtown Cartersville. You have access to 400 and more hotel rooms, gas station, local and chain restaurants. As you can see behind me, I'm sitting in front of the beautiful downtown Cartersville. We have the Booth Western Art Museum, which is the largest Western art museum in the United States. So all of this, having the infrastructure is immediately going to make the region and the state have gains of capital from taxes. They're immediately going to be able to capitalize from all of this. So it's a really great, you have it already here. The access is here. At this time, I'd like to bring up Mike Bearden. He's going to discuss the possibilities.
Folks, you've just heard from 3 of our team members that's responsible for implementing Parks Allatoona and focusing on 3 of the important aspects that makes it a unique opportunity. The 4th is the quality of life of our population, and that will come shortly. But before you understand those elements, which we're all talking to the crowd, the choir, we know y'all understand that. But I want to spend a few minutes drilling down on some of the details that shows you that indeed we have a plan that is feasible and workable and has been worked. The map that you see now has a version that's overlaid on top of what we talked about a few minutes ago, and you will hopefully see the multi-colored outline of a trail system. It's 50 plus miles of interconnected trails that works from opening up Parks Allatoona from the urban center of Cartersville. In the lower left-hand quadrant, you'll see the city of Cartersville. Main Street actually is the front door to Parks Allatoona. And this trail system connects 3 existing trails that are embedded or are in this area already, but that are isolated and not interconnected. So this interconnection linkage will allow Main Street's front door to end up through a mountainous wilderness region area along the shoreline generally of the lake's north shore and wind up in a pristine trout stream of Stamp Creek, some by trail 40 miles away. But this trail will connect those 3 existing trails with 8 more. And what you're seeing here is the colored segments that define those different segments. And I want to point out that there are 3 campgrounds existing within this beautiful area. And this trail system will not penetrate any one of those. It will come close so that they could have approach trails from the campground, but it would have no impact on the operation of those campgrounds. Further, there are several very important pretty important archaeological and environmentally sensitive areas that also the trail has been designed to the preliminary details such that they will not impact nor interfere with those areas. The next slide adds a few other elements. If you can see the red dots, there's about 10 of them. Those are public parking areas that will be quickly and easily economically feasible to adjoin to the trail system and open up these trail systems to the public. And within that area, there's 20, we call them our 20 treasure locations that are focal points within the interconnected trail system that allows our folks through interconnections on the trails 6 archaeological and cultural sites, 6 natural features that are unique and worth visiting on their own right, and 8 existing, I will call them active recreation areas. All of the trail system interconnects those and makes it such that you could walk from Main Street to experience those. The other elements that I want you to focus on, if you can see the color shading in the middle of this map up top, sort of the light pink area or dark pink area, it's has a couple of places in there that are existing hunting areas that are managed by the Georgia DNR for WMA hunting seasons, and there has been some coordination, and there will be need more over time to complement the trail system without interfering with those areas, not unlike what's been done all over the state with existing state parks, whereby interferences from hunting and hiking don't become a safety issue. We recognize that and we'll be working. But the most important I want to leave with you on this chart, again, the blue area is the lake itself. The reason we have this opportunity is that the city of Rome was built in the wrong place 150 years ago, and the purpose that Lake Allatoona exists is overriding to protect people downstream. It's a flood control reservoir, and everything that we talk about here on out is to support that and augment that, and we have no interest in compromising that huge, important safety issue of flood. We're thankful that Rome was built that same place, because we have this wonderful asset because of that, and so we support that. But the main point that what we're making is that Parks Allatoona's trail system that you're seeing here will have all but zero impact on the Corps' mission to protect flood problems, because the contour line that this trail system generally will be following is about 20 feet above the water level. And I am confident to tell you that there was only been one time in 70 years of the existence of the dam that water from any flood has even lapped up to this proposed trail system. One time in 70 years. And there's only 12 acres of footprint along this described route to be used as a passive trail system. 12 acres out of 8,600, which is part of 36,000 acres that the Corps owns here in metropolitan Atlanta. 6 million people. Can you imagine 36,000 acres that's in such a large metropolitan area as a wilderness area? And that is the reason we're talking about this. And my associate, Brenton Baggett, will now come up and drill down on the quality of aspect that Parks Allatoona is so important for us. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Brenton Baggett, Bartow County Parks Recreation. I'm the assistant director there, and we're really excited about this project, Parks Allatoona, and what it can provide for our community and everybody around us. First thing that we see with it is the quality of life that it provides for our community. When quality of life is the standard of health, comfort, and happiness experienced by an individual or group. And we feel like this project will be very, very important and provide great components for a great quality of life for our community. First thing you see is Parks Allatoona make our community a better place to live by preserving and creating open spaces for recreation. We feel that having a close trail network like this project, there's nothing like this around in our area. We have trails, but nothing of this magnitude that we've proposed here. It'll also bring a community with the people that use this facility, and these trails will bring community to our county as well as the surrounding areas. As a matter of fact, a study released in June of 2019 says that it was able to conclude that 2 hours a week or 120 minutes of outdoor recreation has an immeasurable impact on your mental health. And so we feel like by these opportunities, it'll help our community as well as the surrounding areas. And then, this third point I've got is Parks Allatoona will also provide a unique facility to serve a diverse population of our community that may otherwise have limited opportunities to access natural areas due to financial or transportation constraints. We all know that how important it is to get outside again, but sometimes financially people can't do things that they normally would. And we know with trails and stuff, that's inexpensive, and there's no cost to be able to go out and enjoy and get the benefits that provides. One thing as far as Parks and Recreation that we believe in this project is that it can impact a different population than we now serve. We now have a lot of things that we, walking trails around our parks, things for children to play, and as well as adults and different sporting activities and things like this. But this is a different element, and we think that it will kind of appeal to a different group of people that may otherwise not be involved in getting physical activity. And then the last most important thing that, from a Parks and Recreation standpoint that we see is that, exercise and recreational opportunities for the community. And again, we see, Parks Allatoona, and we're extremely excited at the Recreation Department about this project. We We have good friends at the Corps that we work with. We've got numerous properties that we work with them on, and we're hoping that this will be a project that we can work with them on and continue to develop that relationship to just improve the quality of life in our community, as well as people around that may enjoy the trails that will come at Parks Allatoona.
Brenton and fellow teammates, thank you for what a wonderful description of the 4 reasons that Parks Allatoona must happen and what its importance is. I'd like to take a few minutes now to sort of conclude and do a little bit of wrap up. What we have is a plan that's focused on these 6 goals. Everything that we've done has been an attempt to ensure that we're supporting and extending the importance of these goals. I'll not insult you by reading them, but I just want you to know that we have a plan. We know a plan is something to be changed, but these 6 goals fits within the mission that lets us go forward. Further, the scope is summarized. You've heard elements of this in the previous minutes, but it's 8,500 acres of passive and active recreation areas within a wilderness setting within an hour of 6 million folks. It's an integrated, at least 35 and maybe as much as 55 miles of trails linking the urban area to the wilderness. It's important to know that the plan is all on existing public land and facilities. No major capital expenditures are necessary at all to implement it. It's government-owned property that is not presently utilized to its potential. Lastly, on this slide, it's not a unique, but it's a different cut of cloth because there's 5 elements of collaborative cooperation that are necessary to make it moving forward. And we've got a memorandum of understanding and a plan to ensure that that goes forward. And all of these 5 elements are crucial to its success. First, the federal government through the cooperation of the Army Corps of Engineers, Bartow County, City of Cartersville, all of whom have endorsed and provided formal endorsement of this concept. And we've had some coordination thus far with DNR to ensure that the hunting areas are involved in the collaborative planning too. But mostly, this is a model of how things should work. The private sector and the community itself is the leader to ensure that this happens, and that way it will be a very easy push for our governmental sectors to manage it. And the theme is to connect the town with the wilderness. These are repeating elements that we've talked about as we've gone through this morning, and it is not hyperbole to say that each one of these are important and beautiful features in their own right. Be glad to answer questions as we get to the Q&A later on these kind of details. Same thing with later Q&A. This milestone 15 list is halfway done. Done, you'll see, but we're at a stage where we need a little bit of push to ensure that this quality of life aspect is implemented. And my friends and our friends with the Corps of Engineers is where we have a challenge. When I talk about our progress to this point and the nature of the county and the city and the state's cooperation, We now have, fortunate in the last few months, we now have congressional leadership too. Our 11th district congressman is now on board, and this is his project too. And we're working toward the core from Washington down as we move forward to make it happen. But let me take a couple of minutes to sort of confuse you or illuminate for you. You're seeing here on this slide two icons, one of which I'm sure you're quite familiar with, the National Park Service on the right. But the left is the Corps of Engineers icon that represents their mission, which is paramount for everything. They are our protector of our freedom, and the defense structures that they are charged by managing across the country is most important. And here, as it relates to Lake Allatoona and Parks Allatoona, their motto is underneath this icon, build strong. That's their mission, to make sure that they do things right to protect us. We support that. We're all about that. And we don't want to do anything to interfere with that mission. But their mission and their culture results in a totally different, generally, I'm not knocking any one individual, but their culture is focused on building, managing, not as contrast to the National Park Service, whose motto is come hike with us. And everything they do is, and I've had the benefit of hiking in the national parks all over the country. 55 of the 60 most important national parks is my boots have been in. And they do everything they can to invite that. My friends at the Corps are fettered a little bit by that culture, and our real challenge moving forward ultimately winds up in a cubicle somewhere in Washington, D.C., where a lawyer says, this doesn't have anything to do with flood control. Why are we bothering? Those are my words, but we're having to fight through that culture to ensure that this wonderful opportunity for quality of life is exposed to these 6 million people within hours of it. And everything that you've heard before, I'm telling you, is a wonderful, almost unique opportunity on the East Coast of this country that is without parallel with this kind of access or wilderness area to a 6 million population. Is if you can find something similar to this that's better, you tell me and I'll be glad to withdraw some hyperbole. But the flood safety issue of building strong is not under threat. We believe that is most paramount, and we want to ensure that nothing is threatened. We're glad the lake is here. We're glad that the flood control issue design is most paramount, and that our friends in Rome, we're glad that they're there, and it was built in the wrong place 170 years ago. Nothing that we're talking about will threaten the fulfillment. Indeed, if we can develop this partnership, we're convinced that it's going to make the Corps stronger in Northwest Georgia. It will allow arguably their most economically important asset in the Southeast, which is comprised of the dam at Lake Allatoona, the land itself, and the 36,000 acres that are surrounded now by this major United States city, will make them stronger partner locally. And that's what we're saying, is that we're going to make them stronger. We will not quit. The quality of life advantages that are important to our population is too valuable to let it die or give up because somebody in Washington, D.C. doesn't have a match with our vision. We will persist. Thank you. Appreciate your listening. What I've just described in hopefully enough detail for you to understand and support is Parks Allatoona. But there's a bigger picture here that in 1 or 2 minutes, I want you to engage your mind and understand that the possibility of Parks Allatoona becoming a reality will create a keystone in a trail system of national significance. The proposal with Parks Allatoona is we can quickly, with y'all's leadership, link the Appalachian Trail to the city of Atlanta. How does that happen? The trail system itself, as sketched here, you'll see in the middle of the screen, the big A. That's Parks Allatoona. You'll see at the bottom, the big ATL. At the top, you'll see a big A. That's Springer Mountain at the Appalachian Trail. We could quickly, over time, with vision and statewide cooperation, build a linked trail from the Appalachian Trail down into the heart of Atlanta via the Silver Comet Trail or the Chattahoochee River corridor by coming down throughout the mountains through Amicalola River to the Etowah River to Pine Log Mountain, beautiful mountainous region to Parks Allatoona, thence through the existing trail systems in Bartow County, Cartersville, as well as Woodstock and Alpharetta area to connect to the city of Atlanta. We would have a major trail system of national significance if you folks would take the challenge. Why not? Happy trails. Have a great day. Bye. Thanks.